Good morning, BuckTube. It's your boy Buck back here with another long-awaited episode of Buck's Books. Now, as I'm sure you noticed, I haven't been around for almost a month. That is because I had the flu, but now I don't have the flu anymore. So I can start getting into some of the books that I've read, and I crushed like a dozen in the interim. And there are some that have just been waiting a really long time, and this is one of them. Before we get into that, as you can see, I've tricked out my desk space again, and I've set Beefy's little pillow up. He has 3 little pillows floating around the house, just in every room, so he can always be comfortable. He loves it, but his favorite is the couch. What a good boy. Anyway, today I would like to talk to you about a phenomenal book that I read. Gotta be over a month ago now. Yeah, I think it was like 2 months ago. Called Fierce Invalids Home from Hot Climates by Robbins. First of all, the book itself is deeply topical given the recent news cycle and some emails you have likely heard about, whether you liked it or not, no matter where you went or what you tried to do to avoid them. And that is because of the main character, Switters. So Switters is an intellectual, like a real intellectual. He's incredibly intelligent, genius IQ, and he uses this to justify doing whatever the hell he wants all the time. And technically that is his right. This is something I've been grappling with recently myself, just unrelated to this book, but related to some psych books I've recently read. And my stumbling block has always been sort of the idea that if we have these gifts, if you're strong, it's your responsibility to use that strength to the benefit of others. But where do you draw that line? How much is too much? That's the question. If you look in Western romantic literature, there is no too much. All of these, we killed that guy. Remember that guy? His whole deal was sacrificing up until the point where they put him on a cross. Like that's the foundation of Western thought. This sort of tendency toward self-immolation to the point for the benefit of others. Switters is not so much interested in the benefit of others. Switters is exclusively interested in the benefit of Switters, but accidentally benefits others in so doing. And these are other topics that I'm seeing reflected in some of these psych books that talk about, things like boundary setting and trying to quash codependent behaviors. Off the street, you would think because Switters is so intelligent, he has to use this intelligence for the good of mankind. And instead, what he uses it for is working for the CIA. I think the idea that the CIA is ultimately working for the good of mankind is comparatively niche. Switters doesn't care about the CIA. Switters doesn't care about American hegemony or about exceptionalism or about the Empire Games. None of these are of any relevance to Switters. Switters just has a very high threshold for excitation. He is easily bored. This is something that I use very often in session when I talk to people normally with ADHD. Can't imagine what that must be like. And I explain to them that if you have a dog and they're low energy, they're not going to pick up things very well because they can't be bothered. It's like trying to train a chimpanzee. They don't care. You're not going to motivate them to do the things you want. And if you can't motivate them, then you're not going to be able to shape the behavior. The motivation is crucial to the future shaping of that behavior. If you have a medium energy dog, you lucked out. They tend to be very responsive to training. They tend to be relatively intelligent, learn things quick. If you have a high energy dog, they're probably going to be the smartest. More than likely, they're going to be smarter than any dog you've ever had before. However, they will also be insane up until you burn off some of that extra energy. That's why you got to get these border collies out there running for 2 hours a day, because they are built to run for 8 hours a day, chasing sheep around farms and doing literal farm work, doing work that could otherwise only be accomplished by a human being. And if you do not present them with an intellectual challenge of an appropriate caliber, then they will become evil. And they will destroy everything that you love. They will pee on your pillow specifically. They will tear up the couch because they know you love the couch. Well, that's just how it happens. And it's how it happens with us too. We need to be intellectually stimulated. I hesitate to use the word entertained because it has that connotation of just like watching Netflix and eating tasty cakes. And technically that's a form of entertainment, but not a very fulfilling or sustainable one. Eventually you will chafe at the yoke doing that. But with the border collies, they need that. And with the ADHD kids, they need that. And I would suggest that all human beings need that. And the smarter they are, the more that they need that. Because otherwise they'll just... it's like the stereotyped behaviors, like those gorillas that just spin around in a circle in their enclosures. That doesn't happen in nature. The aggressive masturbation that occurs in chimpanzees in the zoo up to the point that they start to do physical damage to their bodies. That doesn't happen in nature. That happens when they're bored. Boredom does that. They need something to do. We all need something to do. Switters needs something to do more than most because he's so intelligent. But again, he uses that intelligence as justification, carte blanche, to do absolutely whatever he wants. And most of what he wants is just, kind of psychopathic. That's got a negative connotation in of itself, because you hear psychopathic, you think Michael Myers, and that's not necessarily the case. For Switters, he's just kind of just doing things and not worrying about any of the moral ramifications, sort of a that's your problem situation. And if he was just doing that in his work for the CIA, that would be, I would say, expected, because again, he's very much smuggling arms. He's taking guns into these banana republics to arm essentially mercenary sects against the prevailing government in order to help to topple them, to expand, once again, American hegemony. But he doesn't have a dog in that fight. He just thinks it's cool, which is about as mercenary as it gets. But, he's an employee. He's not a consultant yet. He becomes a consultant later on. So that's sort of a background of his character. I did sort of bury the lead here, which brings us back to those emails in which he is sort of a PDF file. That's like his deal. He's obsessed with purity as a concept, and he assigns the title of pure to these underage girls. And he did it a lot in Thailand, and he is attempting to do it now with, I believe, a stepsister of his that's 16, something like that. I know she is related to I know it's not a blood relation, but she is within his family, which gives him a lot of opportunities to skeeve in there, 40-year-old CIA operative as he is, and help her with her homework and take her out for ice cream and bond with her and just sometimes sneak her a little kiss. It's the whole book is told from the sort of internal perspective of Switters. So you see how he rationalizes all these things, and like all intelligent people, his rationalizations are logically sound. That's the big one. That's the hard part. Again, I see this all the time in session. If someone is intelligent, their justifications for their actions are going to be absolutely bulletproof, because that's how they got there. if you're smart enough, you can defend anything. They can just because especially when we're talking about something like morality, what we're essentially discussing is a one-on-one debate. Someone else is trying to enforce a moral system on you through their ability to explain it for all intents and purposes. And you are trying to counteract that with your own justifications. And whoever is the better sophist wins. And whoever is smarter by 3 standard deviations is almost always going to be the better sophist. And that's Switter's whole deal. He's hyper intelligent, so no one can stop him. No one can stop him. No one can even explain to him why he should be stopped, because he disregards largely the opinions of other people. So Switters is a man disconnected. No man is an island except for Switters. He drifts from one catastrophe to another, and he's just... I hate Jack Kerouac. I do. All of his books were just Kerouacing off. I think that if he had been born in the age of the internet, he wouldn't have been anything, because everyone is just doing what Jack Kerouac did, only he had to do it with a typewriter. And he's essentially, his books are, for all intents and purposes, Twitter. I would love to punch him in the stomach. However, in Dharma Bums, he did refer to, I believe the character's name was Jaffe, as just amusing himself in the void. And that's all Switters is doing, because functionally he's a nihilist. He doesn't believe anything is real because no one can provide him adequate justification that sufficiently counters his own understanding, which he trusts above all else. And he's more or less right to, because he's so intelligent. But that's a crutch and an excuse. So you see what I'm saying. It's very circular. It's a crutch and an excuse. Because if you have this God-given gift, it's your responsibility to use it for the benefit of others. But doesn't he ultimately use it for the benefit of others? It's not like he's out there, and this is his justification, it's not like he's out there abducting these people. It's not like he is, through a, legally speaking, it would be statutory, but not in Thailand. So, and he has all of these niggling little reposts, the age of consent in that the age of consent in that state is 15. In any event, even if the age of consent in a given state is lower than the federal one, you still have to defer to the federal one, Switters. And you also, it's not talking about your stepsister. It's talking about marriage. But those are not relevant bits of data for him. He's going to discard that entirely, and he's going to do it with this sort of, smug dismissal. Because, again, he's a CIA spook. He doesn't really need to answer to anybody. Laws don't really apply to him in any significant sense. And while he does take advantage of that, he doesn't go out of his way to... it's not for the love of the game. He's not taking advantage of it specifically to be taking advantage of it, which once again brings us to these recent emails. But rather because he feels that these laws have no hold on him. So he winds up sneaking into, I believe it was the Amazon, and gets embroiled in this situation where he receives a curse, a taboo, right? And the taboo, though, it provides him, it was like an ayahuasca trip that provided him all of this knowledge of the world, which changed nothing for him. Like, it made no, like, he enjoyed the trip, and that's what it was. It made no significant difference in his character, but the cost of this wisdom, which, once again, he didn't want, which did nothing for him, was that the taboo the shaman put on him prevented him from ever having his feet touch the ground again. So, from that point on, the book is him trying to cheat this curse, because he believes in it. Because he met this annoying anthropologist down in Brazil that received a similar situation, but a similar taboo. And the taboo said if he ever touched another male penis, if he touched someone else's penis, then he would instantly die. And so he and Switters were like, well, you don't believe in this stuff, do you? And the guy was like, no, of course not. I'm an academic. I'm a grown man. And Switters is like, well, and he whips it out. He's like, this might be your last chance. We're all friends here, you know? So, which, again, sort of gives you an indication of what we're talking about when we say that Switters is obviously a psychopath, but not in the way that it is flagrantly destructive. You know, he's not Leatherface necessarily. He just doesn't care about anything. And so, to demonstrate that he is a scholar and a man of the world, he just gives Switters Pecker a little poke and immediately has a heart attack and dies right in that moment. Surely a coincidence, but Switters is not going to test that. Stranger things have happened. So from that point on, he is trying to cheat the curse, and he invents all sorts of remarkable ways to do so. There's the wheelchair. He likes the wheelchair a lot, and he uses the wheelchair to skeeve on college girls. They are of age. He didn't sleep with any of the college girls, but he did sleep with Zaftig Fishmonger covered in gnat bites, and he said some unduly graphic things about her smell in the course of their time together. He would later use stilts once he wound up washed up in some, I believe it was a Syrian monastery. And that's where he functionally fell in love with a middle-aged woman, a woman of appropriate age, a nun who would not, like, despite, and actually that part of the book was sort of romantic. Like, you were kind of pulling for them because they seemed to get on so well, you know, and also because, come on, Switters. They seemed to get on pretty well, and that the chemistry was believable, but she had her traumas as well that prevented her from ever having sex. So they just, so she's a nun. So they mostly just like fool around, which again, Twitters loves that. Twitters loves that he's fooling around with a nun. That a nun is just cranking his hog. That's his whole deal, because it is, once again, it highlights his obsession with purity and trespass. Like that's his whole deal. That is the star around which he actually orbits. And a lot of that is attributable to his grandmother, who is this hyper-intelligent iconoclast woman who lives back stateside. And she is verbally abusive, is how we would describe it. And she becomes a hacker just for fun. Just, again, to keep herself busy. Because that is another one of the main themes of this book. All these intelligent people, they need something to do. Because if they don't have something to do, they just go crazy. And even when they do have something to do, they kind of go crazy anyway. Because Switters and his grandma were both kind of crazy. Everyone involved is kind of crazy. And the grandmother did say something that stuck with me. I wrote it down in my little quote page, that there are 6 components to being a human being, and if you are lacking in any of these components, you're not a worthwhile human being. And she said they are humor, imagination, eroticism, rebelliousness, spirituality, and aesthetics. And yeah, I think so. That tracks. You need all those things. And anyone who does not have, humor, imagination, eroticism, rebelliousness especially, spirituality, and aesthetics. So spirituality is like the hardest one for me personally, because it's something that I've never had sort of concrete in my life. I did a lot of jumping around. But I will acknowledge its importance, because that is what keeps you from descending in a true nihilism, and nobody likes a true nihilist. You remember the Big Lebowski. Nobody likes a nihilist. These men are cowards. After Switters and the nun do some butt stuff, they start to talk about the prospect of getting married. Because I think at this point she had been excommunicated from the church for something unrelated to what was going on with Switters, which was one of the contributing factors to what went on with Switters at all. And also they had been called to the Vatican because they had a scroll from one of these, because they had this scroll that sort of countered some of the existing established canon within the church. So the Pope wanted to get his hands on that, and Switters, being Switters, gets very paranoid about this meeting and winds up leaping out of the chair to attempt to stop one of the Vatican guards that he thinks is pulling a gun on the nun that he just did butt stuff with. And then it turned out that it was a cell phone that he was trying to give to the nun. And as soon as Switters leapt to his feet, he lost consciousness and assumed that he died. Well, it turns out he didn't die. So the taboo was broken. The taboo was fake all along. But then his buddy that he used to skeeve on underage girls in Thailand with calls him up and tells him that he murdered the shaman who put the taboo on him in the first place, and showed him like a photograph of the severed head, which is triangular, it was pyramid shaped. All of this is relevant to the story, but I cannot explain to you how, because we simply do not have the time. But it is a layered, detailed, beautifully written, deeply confusing, thought-provoking story. I would highly recommend it. I will probably read it again one day, because there is so much to it. And it was fun the whole time, but it'll really get your head bubbling. Like, there's a lot. Switters isn't right, obviously, because Switters is a PDF file and a nihilist. But there are components of his worldview that are impossible to refute, especially given the components of personhood that his grandmother established, right? Humor, imagination, we covered eroticism, but the rebelliousness. You know, a man without rebelliousness is not a man at all. A person, a human being without some component of rebelliousness isn't really worthy of the title of human being. Even if you look at it from a religious perspective, Judeo-Christian, of course, we're the free will experiment. We were the only ones who were given the opportunity to rebel, except for Satan. But he was programmed for it. So is he really rebelling? No, he's modeling rebellion for us. That's the purpose. But that's a morally bankrupt and disconnected intellectualization, which is exactly what you're going to get when you read Fierce Invalids Home from Hot Climates. It's a great book. It really, really is. Maybe you'll think so too. Maybe you will be disgusted by the masturbatory nature of the prose, as many of the people on Goodreads seem to be. However, I think that was a thematic choice as well, because it fits Switters very, very nicely. He plays with words. That's his whole deal. He plays with everything. The universe is his toy box, as far as he's concerned. And he seems happier for it, but how happy can you be when you are cursed? But there are consequences. These are dangerous games. You know, you play these stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So, danger is what drives him in the first place because it's exciting. But if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. If you're farting around in the Amazon trying to smuggle guns, you are going to wind up cursed. These are the consequences of your actions. And that's the thing about consequences. They don't concern themselves with morality necessarily. Now, morality is something for before and after. The consequences just are. So he believed so strongly throughout the entire book, and distressingly enough, he was proven right more times than he wasn't, that he was immune to consequences because he is so adept, because he's so smart, because he is able to keep a cool head in these situations, because he can handle it. And the bastard of it is, that's what many of the psych books suggest you try to cultivate in yourself to counteract this sense of growing unease and anxiety. This is how you challenge a scarcity mindset. I can handle it. Whatever comes my way, I'll be able to do it. So what Switters is doing everything right. He's just doing everything wrong. It's such a good book. It's just layered contradictions. It's such a good book. 5 stars. 10 stars. 10 out of 5. Fantastic. All right. That's enough out of me. I got to go to work at some point. Like, follow, subscribe, do the thing. We're getting very close to 100 subscribers. We're about to be triple digits. This is where it all turns around, fellas.